My name is Eleanor Matthews, and I've had enough. For 5 years, I've endured the humiliation, the lies, and the isolation. I've been painted as the villain in a story where I was only trying to protect my family. My own son, my own flesh and blood, has chosen to believe the worst about me. He banned me from his wife's birthday celebration. But what he doesn't know is that I've discovered the truth. The truth about his precious Vanessa and her web of deception. The truth that will shatter the perfect little world they've built on my broken heart. Mark my words. By the time this is over, they'll regret the day they ever tried to erase me from their lives. Before we continue, if you enjoy stories about family drama and shocking revelations, make sure to click that subscribe button. This is the best way for you to support our work. Thank you very much, and let's continue. I still remember the day my son Daniel brought Vanessa home to meet me. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind that promises winter, but still holds onto the last breath of fall. The leaves in my front yard were a tapestry of reds and golds, and I'd spent all morning baking Daniel's favorite apple pie. My husband Thomas had passed away just 2 years before, and I'd been alone in our family home ever since. Daniel was my only child, my pride and joy, and he rarely brought women home to meet me. So when he called to say he was bringing someone special, someone he was serious about, my heart nearly burst with excitement. I wore my favorite blue dress, the one Thomas always said brought out my eyes, and I even put on makeup for the occasion. The house was spotless, the pie cooling on the windowsill, and I had prepared Thomas's special mulled cider recipe that Daniel had loved since childhood. Everything was perfect. When they arrived, Daniel looked happier than I'd seen him since his father's funeral. He was beaming, his arm wrapped protectively around a slender young woman with chestnut hair and striking green eyes. Vanessa was beautiful, there was no denying that. She was dressed impeccably in a cream-colored blouse and tailored black pants, with delicate gold jewelry that caught the light when she moved. She looked like she belonged on the cover of a magazine, not in my modest suburban home. "Mom, this is Vanessa Chen," Daniel said, his voice brimming with pride. "Vanessa, this is my mother, Eleanor." Vanessa extended her hand, her smile not quite reaching those captivating eyes. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Matthews. Daniel talks about you all the time." Her handshake was firm, professional. I noticed her perfectly manicured nails, the designer watch on her wrist. Even then, something felt off, but I dismissed it as my own insecurity. After all, I was just a high school art teacher now retired. Vanessa, as Daniel had mentioned on the phone, was a rising star at Meridian Financial Group, one of the largest investment firms in the city. "Please call me Eleanor," I said, ushering them inside. "I've prepared Daniel's favorite apple pie. I hope you like cinnamon, dear." "Oh, I don't really eat desserts," Vanessa replied with a practiced laugh. "I have to keep my figure for work." "But thank you for the thought." I saw Daniel's expression falter slightly, but he quickly recovered. "More for us, right, Mom?" That afternoon set the tone for my relationship with Vanessa. On the surface, everything was polite, cordial even, but underneath ran a current of tension I couldn't quite identify. She answered my questions about her life and career, with carefully crafted responses that revealed very little. When I showed her Daniel's childhood photos, she smiled and nodded, but I could sense her disinterest. She kept checking her phone, apologizing for work emergencies that couldn't wait. "Vanessa's just been promoted to junior partner," Daniel explained, looking at her with adoration. "She's the youngest in the company's history." "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. "You must be very dedicated to your work." "I believe in giving everything my full attention," she replied, her gaze steady. "When something matters, you make it a priority." I didn't realize then that I wasn't on her list of priorities. Neither was my son's happiness, though it would take me years to understand the extent of her manipulation. They left early, Vanessa citing another work commitment. As they drove away, I felt a knot forming in my stomach. Something about her felt calculated, as if every word and gesture was carefully chosen for effect. But Daniel was in love, and what mother doesn't want to see her child happy? So I pushed my concerns aside and decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was just nervous about meeting me. Maybe the reserved exterior hid a warm heart that my son had discovered. How wrong I was. Over the next few months, I saw less and less of Daniel. Our Sunday dinners, a tradition since he moved out for college, became increasingly rare. When he did come, it was often without Vanessa, who was always swamped at work or attending a business conference. On the few occasions she accompanied him, she dominated the conversation with stories of her success, the important clients she was handling, the senior partners who were impressed with her work. Daniel would sit beside her, nodding proudly, interjecting only to emphasize her achievements. I began to notice subtle changes in my son. He lost weight and dark circles appeared under his eyes. His vibrant laugh became less frequent. When I asked if everything was all right, he would just say he was busy at work. Daniel was a software engineer at a tech company, and while his job had always been demanding, he had never appeared so drained before. 6 months after I met Vanessa, Daniel called with news that should have been joyous. "Mom, we're engaged." Vanessa said yes. I forced enthusiasm into my voice, ignoring the tightening in my chest. "Oh, Daniel. Congratulations. I'm so happy for you both. We're thinking of a spring wedding, something small and elegant. Vanessa's already found the perfect venue." That's wonderful, honey. Have you set a date? Should I start looking at mother of the groom dresses? There was a pause, then Daniel said, his voice slightly strained. "Actually, Mom, Vanessa thinks we should keep the wedding really intimate. Just close friends and immediate family. And she has some specific ideas about the aesthetic." I understood what he wasn't saying. My input wasn't welcome. This was to be Vanessa's perfect day, orchestrated exactly as she envisioned it. I would be expected to show up, smile for photographs, and otherwise remain in the background. "Of course," I said, swallowing my hurt. "Whatever makes you both happy." The wedding was indeed small and elegant, held at an exclusive vineyard outside the city. Vanessa was breathtaking in a designer gown that probably cost more than my annual pension. Daniel looked handsome in his tuxedo, but his smile seemed fixed, almost rehearsed. I was seated at a table with distant cousins who hadn't seen Daniel since he was a child, while Vanessa's parents, successful surgeons who had flown in from Singapore, were prominently placed at the main table alongside the bride and groom. During the reception, I approached the newlyweds to offer my congratulations. Vanessa accepted my embrace stiffly, pulling away after the briefest contact. "Eleanor, thank you for coming," she said, as if I were a casual acquaintance rather than the mother of the groom. "Daniel and I are so pleased you could be part of our special day." "I wouldn't have missed it for the world," I replied, turning to hug my son. "Daniel, I'm so happy for you. Your father would have been so proud." At the mention of Thomas, Daniel's facade cracked slightly, and I saw genuine emotion in his eyes. "Thanks, Mom. I wish Dad was here." "Daniel, the Hendersons are waiting to speak with us," Vanessa interjected, placing a proprietary hand on his arm. "We should go greet them. They came all the way from New York." And just like that, I was dismissed. I watched them make their way through the crowd, Vanessa guiding Daniel like a skilled puppeteer, her gestures graceful yet commanding. I returned to my table and nursed a glass of champagne, trying to ignore the growing certainty that I was losing my son. After the wedding, the distance between Daniel and me only grew wider. They bought a sleek modern house in an upscale neighborhood, far from my suburban home. When I asked to visit, there were always excuses. They were renovating, they were traveling for work, they were hosting Vanessa's colleagues. On the rare occasions I was invited over, I felt like an intruder in their pristine, minimalist space where nothing was out of place and no personal photographs adorned the walls. Then came the incident at Christmas, 2 years into their marriage. I had been invited for Christmas Eve dinner, another intimate gathering that turned out to include several of Vanessa's work associates but none of Daniel's friends. I brought a handmade quilt as a gift, something I had spent months creating, embroidering their names and wedding date in one corner. Vanessa opened it and barely concealed her distaste. "Oh, it's very traditional." "Thank you, Eleanor, but our bedroom has a strictly white aesthetic. Perhaps we can use it in the guest room." Later, as I helped clear dishes in the kitchen, I overheard Vanessa speaking to one of her colleagues. "Daniel's mother is sweet, but so provincial. She brought us this hideous homemade blanket. Can you imagine? It clashes with everything in our home. I don't know what I'm going to do with it." The colleague laughed. "Just lose it in the next move." That's what I did with my mother-in-law's crocheted monstrosities. I stood frozen, the plate in my hand forgotten, as Vanessa continued. The problem is, she's always trying to push these sentimental family traditions on us. Daniel used to be so caught up in all that emotional baggage, but I've helped him see that we need to focus on our future, not dwell in the past. The plate slipped from my numb fingers, shattering on the tiled floor. Both women turned, startled by the noise. I mumbled an apology and knelt to gather the pieces, tears stinging my eyes. "Oh, Eleanor, please be careful," Vanessa said, her voice honey-sweet with artificial concern. "Daniel, can you help your mother? She's broken one of our Villeroy and Bach plates." Daniel appeared, crouching beside me. "Mom, are you okay?" "Did you cut yourself?" "I'm fine," I managed, though my hands were shaking. "I'm so sorry about the plate." "It's just a plate," he said quietly, and for a moment, I saw my real son again, not the polished version Vanessa had crafted. "Don't worry about it." But Vanessa was already there, inserting herself between us. "Daniel, please take care of this. I need to get back to our guests. Eleanor, perhaps you should sit down. You seem a bit overwhelmed." I wanted to confront her, to tell Daniel what I had overheard. But something in her cold, calculating gaze stopped me. This was her domain, her carefully constructed world. My words would be twisted, reinterpreted, used against me. So I swallowed my hurt and retreated to the living room, where I sat alone on the periphery of the gathering until it was time to leave. As the years passed, my relationship with Daniel deteriorated further. Our phone calls became infrequent, our interactions superficial. When I did see him, it was always in Vanessa's presence, her watchful eyes monitoring our every exchange. I began to notice how he would glance at her before answering my questions, how his responses seemed rehearsed, as if he were following an approved script. I tried reaching out to him privately, sending texts and emails suggesting we meet for lunch, just the two of us. Sometimes he would agree, only to cancel at the last minute. On the rare occasions we did meet, he seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly, anxious about getting back to work. Or more likely back to Vanessa. Then came the news that should have brought us closer. Vanessa was pregnant. Daniel called to tell me, his voice a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Mom, you're going to be a grandmother. Vanessa is expecting. We just had the first ultrasound." My heart soared with joy and hope. A grandchild. Perhaps this would be the bridge that could repair our fractured relationship. "Oh, Daniel, that's wonderful news. How is Vanessa feeling? Is there anything I can do to help?" "She's doing great. You know Vanessa. She's already got everything planned out. We've converted the home office into a nursery. And she's researching the best preschools in the area. Well, when the baby comes, I'd be happy to help. I could watch the little one while you two are at work. It would give me a chance to bond with my grandchild." There was a pause, then Daniel said carefully, "That's really generous, Mom, but we've already looked into nannies. Vanessa thinks it's important to have someone with professional childcare training." The implication was clear. I wasn't qualified to care for my own grandchild. Another rejection, another wall between us. But I pushed aside my hurt, determined to stay positive. "Of course I understand, but I hope I'll get to see the baby regularly. Nothing compares to the bond between a grandparent and grandchild." "Absolutely," Daniel said, but his tone lacked conviction. "We'll figure all that out when the time comes." My grandson, Oliver Thomas Matthews, was born on a stormy spring morning. I wasn't informed until hours after the birth, and when I rushed to the hospital, I found Vanessa's parents already there, cooing over the newborn. Vanessa was propped up in bed, looking remarkably composed for someone who had just given birth. Daniel stood beside her, cradling tiny Oliver in his arms with a look of wonder and terror that reminded me so much of his father when he was born. "Man," he said, seeing me hesitate in the doorway. "Come meet your grandson." I approached cautiously, aware of Vanessa's sharp gaze following my every move. When Daniel placed Oliver in my arms, the rush of love was overwhelming. He had Daniel's nose and chin. But those striking green eyes, those were pure Vanessa. "He's absolutely perfect," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. "Hello, little one. I'm your grandma Eleanor. Mrs. Chun was just saying she'll be staying with us for the first month to help out," Vanessa said pointedly. It's so important for a new mother to have experienced support. I looked up to see Vanessa's mother giving me a polite but dismissive smile.
The message couldn't have been clearer. My help wasn't needed or wanted.
Over the next year,
My visits with Oliver were strictly controlled and supervised.
Vanessa always had an excuse for why I couldn't babysit or spend time alone with him.
He was on a strict feeding schedule.
He napped at specific times. He was going through a phase where strangers made him anxious,
As if his own grandmother were a stranger.
When Oliver turned 1, they threw an elaborate birthday party at their home. I arrived early, hoping to help with preparations, only to find that everything had been catered and a professional event planner was directing the setup.
Vanessa greeted me with her customary air kiss.
"Eleanor, you're early. We're still getting things ready, as you can see."
Perhaps you could wait in the living room. I sat alone while the house filled with guests, mostly Vanessa's colleagues and friends,
with their impeccably dressed children and expensive gifts. Daniel was busy manning the grill,
following instructions from the catering staff.
Oliver, dressed in a tiny button-down shirt and bow tie,
was being passed from guest to guest like a precious exhibit,
with Vanessa hovering protectively nearby.
When it was time for cake, I stood at the back of the crowd, watching as Vanessa and Daniel helped Oliver blow out
his single candle while a professional photographer captured the moment.
As everyone clapped and cheered, I felt an acute sense of exclusion,
as if I were witnessing my family's joy through a glass wall, able to see but not participate.
After the party, as guests were leaving, I approached Daniel with a small package.
"I made this for Oliver," I said, offering the hand-knitted sweater I had spent weeks perfecting.
"It might be a bit big, but he'll grow into it."
Daniel took it with a distracted smile.
"Thanks, Mom. That's really thoughtful." Before he could open it, Vanessa appeared at his side.
"Daniel, the Wilsons are leaving. We should say goodbye."
She took the package from his hands.
"I'll put this with the other gifts. We'll open everything tomorrow when Oliver is rested."
I never saw Oliver wear the sweater.
In fact, when I visited their home in the following months, all the photos displayed showed him in designer children's clothes,
the kind with French names and extravagant price tags.
As Oliver grew from a baby to a toddler, my opportunities to bond with him became increasingly rare. Vanessa enrolled him in an exclusive preschool program at the age of 2, filling his schedule with enrichment activities that left little time for visits with his provincial grandmother. When I did see him, I was struck by how formal and reserved he was for such a young child. He spoke in complete sentences, was impeccably behaved, and rarely displayed the joyful spontaneity typical of toddlers. On one visit, I brought finger paints, remembering how Daniel had loved making colorful messes at that age.
Vanessa intersected the gift with a tight smile.
"That's very sweet, Eleanor, but Oliver is learning watercolor techniques with a proper art instructor. Finger painting is a bit rudimentary for his developmental stage."
I watched as Oliver carefully arranged his toys in perfect symmetry, never raising his voice or showing excitement.
He was 3 years old and already being molded into Vanessa's vision of perfection.
Then came the day that changed everything.
I had stopped by Daniel's office to surprise him with lunch,
something I hadn't done in years. As I approached the reception desk, I overheard 2 young women talking.
"Did you see the email from HR? Another company-wide audit."
"As if we don't have enough to worry about." "I know.
Ever since that embezzlement scandal last year, they've been paranoid. At least we're not in Vanessa Matthews' department. I hear she's been working nights trying to cover up discrepancies before the auditors find them." My hand froze on the door handle. Embezzlement?
Discrepancies.
Vanessa's name linked to something that sounded distinctly illegal?
I pushed the door open and both women looked up, startled. "Can I help you?"
one asked, her expression instantly professional.
"I'm here to see my son, Daniel Matthews. I'm his mother, Eleanor."
"Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Matthews is out of the office today. He called in this morning to say he'd be working from home."
That was odd.
Daniel had texted me just yesterday about a major project he was finishing at the office.
Why would he suddenly be working from home? I thanked the receptionist and left, a sense of unease growing inside me. Instead of going home, I drove to Daniel and Vanessa's house.
Daniel's car wasn't in the driveway,
but Vanessa's sleek BMW was there.
I hesitated, then rang the doorbell. There was no answer, but I could hear movement inside.
I rang again, then called Daniel's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail.
Just as I was about to leave, the door opened.
And Vanessa stood there.
Her expression momentarily unguarded with surprise before smoothing into her usual controlled smile. "Eleanor, this is unexpected."
Behind her,
I caught a glimpse of a man hastily gathering papers from the dining room table.
he was older, distinguished looking, with silver hair and an expensive suit. "I was looking for Daniel."
I said, my suspicions aroused. The receptionist at his office said he was working from home today.
"Yes, but he's not here right now."
Vanessa replied smoothly.
"He had to run some errands. If you called first, I could have saved you the trip." The silver-haired man approached, his curiosity evident. "Vanessa, aren't you going to introduce me?"
She turned, her composure momentarily slipping.
"Of course."
"Richard, this is Eleanor Matthews, Daniel's mother. Eleanor, this is Richard Harrington, my colleague." Richard extended his hand with a charming smile. "Ah, the infamous mother-in-law. I've heard so much about you." "All good things, I hope," I said, shaking his hand while noting the gold cufflinks and the wedding band on his finger. "Vanessa has quite a colorful way of describing you," he replied with a chuckle that suggested complicity.
Vanessa's eyes narrowed.
"Richard, we really should finish going over those reports before the meeting,"
Of course,"
he said, then turned back to me.
"It was a pleasure meeting you, Mrs. Matthews."
I can see where Vanessa gets her determination.
As he walked away, I caught Vanessa's expression, a mixture of anger and something else. Fear, perhaps?
She quickly composed herself. "Eleanor, as you can see, this isn't a good time.
"I have an important work meeting."
I'll tell Daniel you stopped by." "Is everything all right with Daniel?" I asked directly. It's not like him to say he's working from home when he's not.
"Everything is fine,"
she said, her voice clipped. "Daniel is under a lot of pressure at work right now."
"and I'm helping him manage his stress. Now, if you'll excuse me." Before I could respond, she closed the door in my face.
I stood there for a moment, processing what I had just witnessed. The man, Richard Harrington, certainly didn't seem like just a colleague. The way he spoke, the familiarity in his manner, it suggested a much closer relationship. And why would Daniel lie about working from home?
Where was he really?
These questions haunted me as I drove home. I tried calling Daniel again, but still no answer. That evening I searched online for Richard Harrington Meridian Financial,
and discovered he was no mere colleague. He was the CEO of the company,
nearly 20 years Vanessa's senior. Further searching revealed mentions of him at charity events, always with his wife of 30 years by his side. Not once was Vanessa pictured with him in any of these social settings. My suspicions grew, but I needed more information before approaching Daniel.
Over the next few weeks, I began paying more attention to the business section of the newspaper.
Reading about Meridian Financial's recent troubles. There were rumors of accounting irregularities, whispers of an internal investigation, and Vanessa's name appeared in several articles as the head of the division under scrutiny. Then came the phone call that confirmed my worst fears.
It was a Tuesday evening,
and I was grading papers for my volunteer art class at the senior center when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar.
"Hello, is this Eleanor Matthews?"
A woman's voice asked.
"Yes, who's calling, please?"
"Mrs. Matthews, my name is Diane Lopez. I'm a forensic accountant working with the FBI.
"I'm calling regarding your daughter-in-law, Vanessa Chan Matthews." My heart seemed to stop.
The SBI?
What's this about?
I'm not at liberty to discuss all the details over the phone, but we're investigating financial irregularities at Meridian Financial Group, and Mrs. Matthews' name has come up in our investigation. We believe she may have information critical to our case. We've been trying to reach her, but she seems to have
disappeared.
Your son as well." The room spun around me. Disappeared? That's impossible. I spoke to Daniel just 2 days ago. He mentioned they were planning a trip to visit Vanessa's parents in Singapore.
But they weren't leaving until next week.
Mrs. Matthews, according to our information, Vanessa and Daniel Matthews boarded a flight to Singapore yesterday morning.
We have reason to believe they may not be planning to return.
I was hoping you might have more information about their plans or whereabouts.
My mind raced.
Daniel hadn't mentioned moving up their trip. He hadn't said goodbye. This wasn't like him at all. I don't know anything about this," I stammered. "Daniel would have told me if they were leaving early."
There must be some mistake. I understand this must be shocking for you,
Miss Lopez said, her tone softening slightly. But I need to ask you some questions about your daughter-in-law's behavior recently.
Have you noticed anything unusual? Any signs of stress or anxiety? Sudden unexplained wealth or financial decisions? I thought about the luxury cars, the expensive renovations to their home, the extravagant vacations, all on salaries that, while generous, shouldn't have afforded such opulence. I thought about Vanessa's late nights at the office, her secretive phone calls, her insistence on handling all their finances. There have been things that seemed
off, I admitted. But Daniel always said Vanessa was brilliant with investments, that she had a knack for making their money grow. Mrs. Matthews, we have reason to believe Vanessa Chan has been embezzling funds from client accounts for several years. The total amount may exceed $20 million. We also suspect she's been using your son's technical expertise to cover her tracks, possibly without his full knowledge of what he was facilitating. The revelation hit me like a physical blow.
$20 million.
My daughter-in-law, a thief on a grand scale.
And my son, potentially an unwitting accomplice.
Or worse, a willing participant. This can't be happening, I whispered. Daniel is a good person. He would never knowingly be involved in something illegal. We're still determining the extent of Mr. Matthews' involvement, Ms. Lopez replied carefully. But given that they've fled the country together, it doesn't look good for either of them.
Mrs. Matthews, if you hear from your son,
I urge you to encourage him to return and cooperate with our investigation.
It would be in his best interest.
Especially if he was manipulated into participating. She left her contact information, and I promised to call if Daniel reached out to me.
After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence trying to process this bombshell. My son a fugitive.
My daughter-in-law a criminal.
My grandson caught in the middle of this disaster. Oliver. The thought of him jolted me out of my stupor. Where was he? Had they taken him with them?
I immediately called the preschool where he was enrolled, only to be told that Oliver hadn't been in attendance for the past 2 days.
His parents had notified the school that they were taking an extended family trip, so they had taken him,
uprooted him from his home,
his routine, everything familiar,
to flee from the consequences of Vanessa's actions.
My poor grandson, just 4 years old, now entangled in this web of deception. I spent a sleepless night cycling through emotions, disbelief, anger, grief, worry.
By morning, I had resolved to do whatever it took to help Daniel and Oliver. I called Ms. Lopez and offered my full cooperation with the investigation, emphasizing my belief that Daniel may have been manipulated by Vanessa.
The next few weeks were a blur of FBI interviews,
legal consultations, and desperate attempts to contact Daniel.
I tried every number I had for him, sent countless emails and messages,
all of which went unanswered. I reached out to Vanessa's parents in Singapore, only to be told coldly that they hadn't heard from their daughter and had no information to share. Then, nearly a month after they had fled, I received a text from an unknown international number.
Mom, we're safe.
Please don't worry. I'll explain everything when I can.
Trust me. Love, D.
I immediately forwarded the message to Ms. Lopez, who confirmed it had been sent from a location in Singapore but couldn't trace it further. The message brought me both relief and renewed anguish. Daniel was alive and seemingly well,
but he was still running, still entangled in Vanessa's schemes.
2 more months passed with no further communication.
The FBI investigation continued, revealing the extent of Vanessa's crimes.
She had been siphoning money from client accounts for years, using her position and charm to avoid scrutiny. The evidence increasingly suggested that Daniel had indeed helped her cover her tracks, using his programming skills to create false records and hide the money trail. Whether he had done so knowingly remained unclear.
Then came another text.
Mom, things falling apart. Be not who I sought. Need help but can't come home. Authorities watching. Oliver misses you. My heart raced as I read the message.
This was the opening I had been waiting for. A crack in Vanessa's perfect facade.
A chance to reach my son. With the FBI's guidance, I crafted a response. Daniel, whatever has happened, we can work through it together. The FBI knows you may have been manipulated.
Come home with Oliver. I'll help you both.
Days passed with no reply. I was beginning to lose hope when my phone rang in the middle of the night. It was Daniel, his voice strained and distant.
Mom, I've made a terrible mistake. Vanessa. She's not who I thought she was. She's been using me, using my skills to hide what she was doing.
I swear I didn't know the full extent of it until recently.
Oh, Daniel.
I whispered, tears streaming down my face.
Tem's home.
Bring Oliver home. We'll face this together.
I can't. The moment we land in the US, I'll be arrested.
Vanessa made sure my name is all over the transactions.
She set me up as her fall guy. The FBI suspects that's what happened. If you cooperate, tell them everything, they can help you. Daniel, you can't keep running. Think of Oliver.
There was a long silence, then Daniel said quietly,
That's why I'm calling. Vanessa's left us.
She took most of the money and disappeared. She's been having an affair with Richard Harrington for years.
He was supposed to meet her here, but the FBI got to him first.
Now she's gone and I'm stuck here with Oliver, nearly broke, afraid to come home but afraid to stay. The confirmation of Vanessa's affair with Richard Harrington didn't surprise me, but her abandonment of Oliver did. How could any mother leave her child behind? Daniel, listen to me, I said firmly.
You need to come home and face this.
Running only makes you look more guilty. For Oliver's sake, for your sake, come home. I'll be there every step of the way. Another pause, then a defeated sigh. Okay, Mom.
For Oliver. But I need help with logistics. My accounts are frozen, and I barely have enough for our daily expenses, let alone plane tickets.
Working with the FBI, I arranged for Daniel and Oliver to return to the United States. Daniel would be arrested upon arrival,
but his cooperation would be noted,
and the evidence of Vanessa's manipulation would be considered. I sold Thomas's vintage car collection, which I had kept all these years out of sentiment, to hire the best criminal defense attorney I could find. The day of their return was both the hardest and most hopeful day of my life. I stood at the international arrivals gate, my heart hammering against my ribs,
waiting to see my son and grandson. When they finally appeared,
Daniel looked thin and haunted, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion and shame. Beside him, clutching his hand, was Oliver, who had grown so much in the months they'd been gone. His little face was solemn, confused by the upheaval in his young life. As expected, FBI agents were waiting. They allowed Daniel a moment with me before taking him into custody. He hugged me fiercely, whispering,
Take care of Oliver.
Tell him every day that I love him. Mom, I'm so sorry for everything. Then he knelt before Oliver, his voice breaking as he explained that he had to go away for a while, but that Grandma Eleanor would take care of him.
Oliver clung to his father, crying in confusion and fear.
It took all my strength not to break down as Daniel gently disentangled himself and allowed the agents to lead him away in handcuffs. And just like that, I became Oliver's guardian. The little boy who had been kept at arm's length from me was now entirely in my care, traumatized by his mother's abandonment and his father's arrest. The first few weeks were incredibly difficult. Oliver had nightmares, wet the bed,
and sometimes refused to speak for hours.
He clung to me desperately one moment,
then pushed me away the next, his young mind struggling to process the multiple betrayals he had experienced.
I transformed my home to make it welcoming for him, converting my art studio into a bedroom filled with comfort and warmth. I enrolled him in therapy with a child psychologist who specialized in trauma, and slowly, painfully, we began to build a relationship on more than the superficial connection Vanessa had permitted. Meanwhile, Daniel's case progressed through the legal system. His cooperation proved invaluable to the authorities as they built their case against Vanessa, who remained at large. Evidence emerged supporting Daniel's claim that he had been manipulated. His technical skills exploited through a combination of lies, emotional coercion, and careful compartmentalization of information. While he wasn't completely innocent, he had ignored red flags and failed to ask crucial questions. It became clear that he had been a tool in Vanessa's schemes rather than a willing partner. After 6 months of legal battles,
Daniel was sentenced to 2 years in a minimum security facility,
with the possibility of early release for good behavior. It was a far lighter sentence than he might have received without his cooperation.
And the mitigating circumstances.
The day of his sentencing, he looked directly at me in the courtroom and mouthed, "Thank you for believing in me."
Life settled into a new routine.
Oliver and I visited Daniel every week, watching as he gradually reclaimed his sense of self away from Vanessa's influence.
In prison, He began teaching computer skills to other inmates.
finding purpose and helping others rebuild their lives.
Our relationship, too, was healing.
Growing stronger than it had been in years, as we communicated openly about the past and our hopes for the future. Oliver flourished in my care, gradually shedding the rigid perfectionism Vanessa had instilled in him. He discovered the joy of messy finger painting, of building elaborate blanket forts in the living room, of running barefoot through sprinklers on hot summer days. He began to laugh freely, to express his emotions without fear of disapproval. The reserved, miniature adult was becoming a real child at last.
A year into Daniel's sentence, the FBI made a breakthrough.
Vanessa had been tracked to a small coastal town in Portugal, living under an assumed name with a significant portion of the stolen funds. She was arrested and extradited to face multiple charges of fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. Richard Harrington, who had already pleaded guilty to lesser charges in exchange for his testimony against her, confirmed that their affair had been going on for years, and that he had helped her conceal some of her activities out of infatuation and fear for his own reputation. When news of Vanessa's arrest reached us, Oliver had a surprisingly mature reaction for a 5-year-old.
Is my mommy a bad person?
He asked, his green eyes so like hers wide with confusion.
I chose my words carefully.
Your mommy made some very bad choices, Oliver. She hurt people, including you and your daddy. But that doesn't mean you can't still love the good parts of her that you remember. He considered this, then asked,
Did she ever love me? Or Daddy?
My heart broke at the question no child should have to ask.
I believe she loved you both in her own way, I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced.
But some people don't know how to love properly. They get confused and think other things like money or power
are more important than the people in their lives.
Oliver nodded solemnly. I'm glad I have you, Grandma.
You know how to love properly.
Daniel was released after serving 18 months of his sentence, coming home to a very different life than the one he had left. With his criminal record, his career in software engineering was effectively over,
at least in any conventional sense.
But during his incarceration, he had developed a new passion for teaching technology skills to disadvantaged populations.
With my support,
he enrolled in an education program to earn a teaching certificate,
determined to transform his experience into something positive.
Oliver, now 6, was overjoyed to have his father home. They spent hours together building model airplanes,
playing catch in the backyard,
reading stories at bedtime. All the simple father-son activities that had been missing during the years of Vanessa's control. Watching them together, seeing the genuine joy in both their faces, I felt a profound sense of gratitude amid all the pain we had endured. Vanessa's trial was a media sensation.
The details of her crimes and the manipulation of her husband splashed across newspapers and dissected on television.
Daniel was called to testify,
an ordeal that reopened wounds just beginning to heal.
But he faced her in the courtroom with a quiet dignity that brought tears to my eyes. When asked why he had gone along with her schemes, he answered simply,
I believed in her. I trusted her. I loved her. And I was wrong.
Vanessa was ultimately sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. The judge was particularly harsh in his condemnation of her abandonment of Oliver, calling it, perhaps the most revealing indication of her true character. As the verdict was read,
I searched her face for any sign of remorse, any indication that somewhere beneath the calculated exterior
was a person capable of genuine feeling.
All I saw was cold anger at having been caught, at having her perfect life destroyed.
In the aftermath of the trial, as we worked to rebuild our lives away from the shadow of Vanessa's crimes,
an unexpected opportunity arose.
Daniel's story had caught the attention of a non-profit organization dedicated to helping victims of financial fraud. They offered him a position as an educator, teaching people how to recognize and avoid the kinds of schemes that had entangled him. It wasn't the prestigious tech career he once had, but it was meaningful work that allowed him to use his experience to help others. We sold both our houses, my suburban home and the sleek modern house that had never really felt like a home to Daniel and Oliver,
and bought a charming craftsman-style home halfway
between Daniel's new job and Oliver's school. The three of us moved in together,
forming an unconventional but loving family unit.
My retirement savings, combined with what remained of Daniel's assets after legal fees,
gave us a modest but comfortable life.
One sunny afternoon, as I sat on the porch watching Daniel and Oliver plant vegetable seedlings in our new garden, I marveled at the journey that had brought us here. Through deception, betrayal, and heartbreak,
We had found our way back to what truly mattered.
the bonds of family, the strength of love, the power of truth.
Vanessa had nearly destroyed us with her lies. But in the end, her schemes had failed.
We were together, healing, growing stronger in the broken places.
That evening,
As I tucked Oliver into bed in his room decorated with the solar system mobile Daniel and I had built together,
he asked me a question that caught me off guard. Grandma, do you think people can change? Like if they've been really bad, can they ever become good again? I sat on the edge of his bed, considering my answer carefully.
I do believe people can change, Oliver. It's not easy and they have to truly want to change. They have to face the wrong things they've done and work very hard to make different choices.
But yes, I believe change is possible. He nodded thoughtfully. Maybe someday my mommy will change. Maybe she'll say sorry for the bad things she did.
Maybe, I said, though I had my doubts.
Vanessa had shown no sign of remorse throughout her trial.
But even if she doesn't, that doesn't change who you are. You're a kind, brave, wonderful boy who is loved very much by your daddy and me.
I know,
He said with the simple confidence of a child who feels secure in his world. That's enough.
as I kissed his forehead and turned off the light.
Leaving only his glow-in-the-dark stars illuminating the ceiling, I realized that he was right.
It was enough.
Not perfect, not the life any of us had envisioned, but enough. More than enough.
5 years passed, each day bringing new healing and growth.
Daniel thrived in his role as an educator, finding purpose in helping others navigate the complex world of financial security. Oliver grew into a thoughtful, resilient boy who loved art and science in equal measure.
I discovered a passion for teaching art to children who had experienced trauma, using my own journey to connect with and help others.
We heard nothing from Vanessa during those years. She had been transferred to a federal facility in another state, and she made no attempt to contact Daniel or Oliver. Her parents, too, had severed all ties with us, apparently ashamed of their daughter's crimes and unwilling to maintain a relationship with the grandson who reminded them of her disgrace. Then, on the eve of Oliver's 11th birthday, a letter arrived with a prison postmark. Daniel and I debated whether to open it, concerned about the impact it might have on Oliver's emotional well-being. In the end, we decided that Daniel would read it first to determine whether its contents were appropriate to share. That night, after Oliver had gone to bed,
Daniel sat at the kitchen table, the open letter in his hands.
his expression unreadable.
She's asking to see Oliver.
He said finally, his voice flat. She claims she's changed, that she's participated in all sorts of rehabilitation programs. She says she knows she can never make up for what she did, but she wants a chance to apologize to him in person.
Do you believe her?
I asked gently. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair, now streaked with premature gray. I don't know. The Vanessa I thought I knew never existed. She was a construct, a carefully crafted image designed to get what she wanted. How can I possibly judge if this remorse is genuine or just another manipulation?
What does your gut tell you?
He was quiet for a long moment. That Oliver deserves to have the choice. He's old enough now to understand at least partially what happened.
If he wants to see her, maybe we should consider it.
After much discussion, we decided to approach Oliver about the letter. We explained in age-appropriate terms that his mother had written and wanted to see him. We emphasized that the decision was entirely his, that we would support whatever he chose, and that he could change his mind at any time. Oliver listened with solemn attention.
His green eyes, so reminiscent of Vanessa's yet filled with a warmth hers had never possessed, thoughtful. I think I want to see her,
He said finally.
just to ask her some questions. But,
He looked up at Daniel anxiously.
could you and Grandma come with me?
I don't want to go alone,
Of course.
Daniel assured him, pulling him into a hug. We'll be right there with you the whole time. The prison visit was arranged for the following month.
As the day approached, Oliver grew increasingly pensive, sometimes waking with nightmares.
Other times asking probing questions about his mother that we struggled to answer honestly while sparing him details too heavy for his young shoulders. The morning of the visit, as we drove to the Federal Correctional Facility,
Oliver sat quietly in the back seat,
clutching a small notebook in which he had written the questions he wanted to ask. Daniel and I exchanged worried glances, both wondering if we had made the right decision in allowing this meeting. The prison visiting area was stark and institutional, despite efforts to make it more welcoming for the children who came to see incarcerated parents. We were seated at a table, nervously waiting, when the door opened and Vanessa was escorted in. Prison had changed her physically. The designer clothes and perfect grooming were gone, replaced by a standard-issue uniform and hair pulled back in a simple ponytail.
She had lost weight, and fine lines had appeared around her eyes and mouth.
But the most striking change was in her demeanor. The confident,
almost arrogant posture had been replaced by a hesitant, uncertain manner I had never seen in her before. Her eyes locked on Oliver immediately, welling with tears.
"Oliver," she whispered, her voice cracking, "you've grown so much." Oliver stared at her,
his expression a mixture of curiosity and wariness.
"Hello, Mother," he said formally, the childhood name of Mommy long abandoned. Vanessa flinched at the formality but nodded in acceptance. Her gaze shifted to Daniel,
then to me,
recognition and something like shame flickering across her face. "Thank you for bringing him," she said quietly.
"I know you had every reason to refuse." The conversation that followed was difficult, halting, filled with uncomfortable silences and painful truths.
Oliver asked his prepared questions with a maturity beyond his years. Why had she taken the money? Had she ever really loved him and his father? Why had she left him behind when she fled? Vanessa's answer seemed genuinely remorseful, though whether that remorse was for her actions or merely for being caught remained ambiguous. She spoke of greed, of ambition that had consumed her, of the thrill of outsmarting everyone around her. She admitted that love had always been difficult for her, that she had seen relationships primarily as transactions,
people as means to ends.
"But you were different, Oliver," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You were the one pure thing in my life. Leaving you was the worst mistake I ever made, worse even than the crimes that put me here. I tell myself I thought you'd be better off with your father.
But the truth is, I was selfish. I was thinking only of escape, not of what you needed.
And I'll regret that for the rest of my life."
Oliver listened, occasionally consulting his notebook, occasionally asking follow-up questions.
When Vanessa had answered everything he wanted to know,
he sat in silence for a moment,
then reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I drew this for you," he said, sliding it across the table. "It's our family now, me dad and grandma."
"We're happy. I wanted you to know that." Vanessa unfolded the drawing with trembling hands.
It showed 3 figures in front of a house, all smiling, surrounded by a garden. The sun shone brightly overhead, and a dog, the golden retriever we had adopted 2 years ago,
lay at their feet.
"It's beautiful, Oliver," she said, her voice thick with emotion.
"I'm so glad you're happy."
"That's all I want for you now." As our visiting time drew to a close, Oliver asked one final question.
"Will you keep writing to me?" Vanessa looked surprised, then cautiously hopeful.
"If your father and grandmother allow it, yes, I'd like that very much."
Daniel nodded. "We'll read the letters first, but as long as they're appropriate,
Oliver can correspond with you if he wants to." As we prepared to leave, Vanessa turned to me, meeting my eyes directly for perhaps the first time in all the years I had known her.
"Eleanor,"
she said hesitantly,
"I know this doesn't change anything, but I'm sorry."
"For how I treated you, for what I did to your family. You were right about me all along." I didn't speak immediately, weighing my response carefully.
This wasn't about forgiveness.
Some actions have consequences that ripple too far for simple forgiveness. This was about acknowledging truth, about closing one chapter so another could begin.
"Thank you for saying that."
I said finally. "What matters now is that Oliver has the chance to know you as you truly are. Not the person you pretended to be, not the criminal who hurt so many people, but whoever you're becoming now. He deserves that truth, however complicated it might be." She nodded, understanding the limits of what I was offering. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but a cautious acceptance of her place in our lives as Oliver's biological mother. A place that would always be circumscribed by the choices she had made. As we left the prison, Oliver was subdued but seemed lighter somehow, as if a burden of unanswered questions had been lifted from his shoulders. In the car, he leaned against Daniel, who wrapped an arm around him protectively. "Are you okay, buddy?"
Daniel asked. Oliver nodded slowly. I think so.
"She's different than I remembered. Sadder. I thought I'd be really angry when I saw her."
But mostly I just felt sorry for her. That's a very compassionate response,
I said,
turning to look at him from the front seat.
"How do you feel about writing to her?"
He considered this.
"I don't know if I want to do it a lot."
Maybe sometimes. Is that okay?
"That's absolutely okay," Daniel assured him. "You get to decide what kind of relationship you want to have with her, if any. There's no right or wrong answer."
I'm glad you and Grandma are my real family,
Oliver said suddenly,
his young face serious. The kind that loves properly.
That night, as I prepared for bed, I found myself thinking about Vanessa's words. "You were right about me all along." There was no satisfaction in the admission, only a profound sadness for all that had been lost. The years Daniel and Oliver had spent under her influence, the pain her deception had caused, the lives damaged by her crimes. Yet amid that sadness was also gratitude for the family we had built from the ashes of her destruction. Daniel had found his true calling helping others avoid financial predators. Oliver was growing into a thoughtful, emotionally intelligent young man with a strong moral compass. And I had been given the greatest gift. The chance to be truly present in their lives, to love them openly and be loved in return. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized that in her attempt to exclude me from their lives, Vanessa had ultimately brought us closer together than we might otherwise have been. Her crimes had forced us to rebuild everything, to examine what truly mattered, to forge connections based on honesty rather than facade. It wasn't a path any of us would have chosen, but it had led us home nonetheless. 5 more years passed. Oliver grew into a thoughtful teenager with a passion for documentary filmmaking and social justice. Daniel expanded his work to include advocacy for white-collar crime victims, testifying before congressional committees about the need for stronger protections and more resources for those affected. I continued teaching art to traumatized children, finding profound fulfillment in helping young people express what they couldn't put into words. Vanessa maintained sporadic contact with Oliver through carefully monitored letters. She never asked for more than he was willing to give, seeming to understand the precarious nature of the connection they were rebuilding. Whether her reformation was genuine or simply another adaptation to her circumstances remained an open question, but her communication with Oliver appeared to provide him with some closure, some understanding of the woman who had given him life but not the nurturing he deserved. Then came the day that brought Vanessa's story full circle. Oliver, now 16, had been invited to participate in a prestigious young filmmakers workshop hosted by a major media company. His short documentary about children of incarcerated parents had caught the attention of industry professionals, earning him a spot in the competitive program. Daniel and I were bursting with pride as we accompanied him to the opening reception, watching as he confidently navigated conversations with established filmmakers and fellow students. As we stood near the refreshment table, a distinguished woman in her 60s approached us, her gaze fixed on Oliver with unmistakable interest. "Excuse me," she said. "But are you Oliver Matthews? The young man who created Through the Glass?" Oliver nodded, extending his hand professionally. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for watching my film." "It was extraordinary," she said, shaking his hand warmly. "The emotional intelligence and technical skill you displayed are remarkable for someone your age." "I'm Patricia Harrington, head of the documentary division at Crestview Media. I'd love to talk with you about your future plans." At the name Harrington, I felt a jolt of recognition. Could she be related to Richard Harrington, Vanessa's former lover and accomplice? Before I could process this thought, Patricia turned to greet Daniel and me. Her eyes widened as she looked at me, a flash of recognition crossing her face. "Hello, ma'am," she said, her tone shifting subtly. "You look familiar. Have we met before?" In that moment, I realized who she was, Richard Harrington's wife, the woman who had been humiliated by her husband's affair with Vanessa. She had been present at Richard's sentencing hearing, sitting stoically as the details of his infidelity and financial crimes were laid bare in court. I had noticed her then, impressed by her dignity in the face of public shame. "I don't believe we've been formally introduced," I said carefully, "but we were both present at a rather difficult legal proceeding some years ago." "I'm Eleanor Matthews, Oliver's grandmother." Understanding dawned in her eyes,
followed by a complex series of emotions: surprise, discomfort, and something that might have been compassion. Eleanor Matthews.
She repeated softly. Yes, I remember now.
You're Daniel's mother.
And you, she turned to Daniel. You're the one who testified about being manipulated by my husband and that woman. Daniel tensed beside me, his expression guarded.
Yes.
I'm sorry for what happened to you, Mrs. Harrington.
You were as much a victim as anyone. Patricia nodded, a sad smile crossing her face. More than most know.
27 years of marriage, and I never saw what Richard truly was until it all came crashing down. She looked at Oliver, who was watching the exchange with confusion.
I'm sorry, young man. This must be very uncomfortable for you. It's okay,
Oliver said, his filmmaker's curiosity evident. Were you married to the man my mother was involved with? Patricia's expression softened.
Yes, I was.
But that's ancient history now.
What matters is that you've created something powerful and important with your film.
The past doesn't define you, Oliver. Remember that.
She handed him her business card.
Call my office next week. I'd like to discuss a mentorship opportunity with you.
If you're interested.
As she walked away,
Oliver turned to us.
His expression a mixture of embarrassment and resolve. Is it always going to be like this? People looking at me and seeing her crimes instead of me? Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. No, he won't.
Some people will make that connection, but most won't.
And the ones who matter will see you for who you are. A talented, compassionate young man who's creating his own path. Your father's right, I added. And look at what just happened. Mrs. Harrington could have reacted very differently.
But she chose to see your talent
and your potential instead of your connection to a painful part of her past. That says something important about moving forward.
Oliver considered this, then nodded slowly.
I think I want to call her about that mentorship. My film is about breaking cycles and finding healing. Maybe working with her would be part of that story.
As we drove home that evening,
I reflected on the strange symmetry of the encounter with Patricia Harrington. The woman who had been wounded by Vanessa's actions was now offering an opportunity to Vanessa's son.
The cycle of hurt could have continued.
Patricia could have dismissed Oliver based solely on his connection to the woman who had helped destroy her marriage.
Instead,
she had recognized his talent and offered a hand up, choosing to foster healing rather than perpetuate pain. It seemed fitting somehow, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the possibility of finding meaning even in the aftermath of betrayal. Vanessa's story wasn't over.
She would remain in prison for many more years.
But its ripple effects continued to shape all of our lives in unexpected ways. Later that night, as Daniel, Oliver, and I sat on the porch swing watching fireflies illuminate the summer darkness, Oliver asked a question that cut to the heart of our shared journey. Do you think we're better or worse off because of what Mom did? Daniel and I exchanged glances, neither of us immediately sure how to answer such a profound question.
That's complicated,
Daniel said finally.
What Vanessa did caused tremendous pain and disruption.
Many people lost their life savings because of her crimes. Our family was torn apart.
Those are objectively terrible outcomes. But,
I added gently, how we responded to that devastation, that was our choice. The family we've built, the work your father does helping fraud victims, your films that give voice to children affected by incarceration,
my art therapy with traumatized kids.
All of that came from my response to the pain.
So good things can come from bad situations,
Oliver said thoughtfully. They can, Daniel agreed. Not automatically, and not in a way that erases or justifies the bad things.
But yes, beauty and meaning can emerge from brokenness. That's part of being human.
Finding ways to create something meaningful even from our most painful experiences. Oliver nodded, leaning against my shoulder as he had done since childhood. I think I understand. It's like that Japanese art form you taught me about, Grandma Kintsugi.
Breaking pottery.
And repairing it with gold, to make it more beautiful than before.
Exactly like that,
I said, hugging him close. We were broken, but we've been repaired with something precious.
The truth, hard-won wisdom,
and deeper love for each other.
The cracks are still visible,
but they've become part of a more beautiful whole. As the fireflies danced around us and the first stars appeared in the evening sky,
I felt a profound sense of peace.
The son who had once banned me from his wife's birthday celebrations now sat beside me,
our relationship stronger and more authentic than ever before.
the grandson who had been kept at arm's length was now the heart of our family, binding us together with his creativity and compassion. Vanessa had nearly destroyed us with her lies and manipulation,
But in the end, her scheme had failed. The truth had emerged, painful but cleansing.
allowing us to rebuild on a foundation of honesty and genuine love.
We carried scars from the ordeal,
Each of us changed by what we had endured.
but we carried them together. A family forged in fire, stronger at the broken places.
And as Oliver began to doze against my shoulder, his teenage frame somehow still fitting perfectly in the crook of my arm, I whispered a truth that had sustained me through the darkest moments of our journey.
We are not defined by what happens to us, but by how we respond to it.
And we've responded with love. Daniel reached over, taking my free hand in his. Thanks, Mom, for everything. For believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself.
For giving Oliver the childhood he deserves. For showing us both what real love looks like.
That's what family does, I replied simply. We hold on to each other.
Especially when the storms come. Even when we push you away.
He asked, regret coloring his voice.
Especially then, I assured him. That's when holding on matters most.
As we sat together in the gathering darkness,
Bound by love that had withstood betrayal, separation, and pain.
I felt a quiet joy that transcended all the heartache we had endured. This was the truth Vanessa had never understood, that real wealth wasn't found in stolen millions or carefully crafted appearances, but in the messy, imperfect, precious bonds of family.
And trying to exclude me from their lives.
She had ultimately brought us closer together than we might otherwise have been. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with being pushed away, only to find your way back to where you truly belong.
And sometimes, healing comes in the most unexpected moments.
Like when your former daughter-in-law's boss's wife looks at you across a crowded room and says, simply, "Hello, ma'am," bridging past and present with a gesture of recognizing our shared humanity, our common vulnerability, and our capacity for growth beyond our wounds.